when working with coordinates, Year 4 and Year 5 usually work on just the first quadrant, which is the quadrant in the top right here. They usually just have that area. However, today we're going to look at all 4 quadrants. So you have 2 lines that run through the centre. You have this horizontal line, which is the x-axis, and you have a vertical line, which is called the y-axis. And the whole point of coordinates is to be able to identify a specific point on the grid. And we do that using 2 numbers. You have the number on the x-axis and the number on the y-axis, which helps us identify a specific point. When we have these 2 numbers, we always refer to the number on the x-axis first and then the y-axis. Often when your teacher teaches you about this at school, she'll say to you that if you walk into a hospital, you'll walk along the corridor first, which is the x-axis, and only then will you go up, which is the y-axis. So the x-axis is the first number and the y-axis is the second number. To help you understand this, I'm going to label each quadrant as I go through. So this first quadrant, I'm going to call it A, and I'm going to plot a point. And I'm going to plot my point just here. Okay, so if I look at the x-axis, which is my first number, I can see that I've got 5, and my second number is 6. So that point has been plotted on 5, 6, and we put that in brackets. What do you notice about those 2 numbers in quadrant A? What you should spot is that they are both positive numbers. And we can see that very easily because here, where this dot fell in quadrant A, the x-axis is positive and the y-axis is positive. Let's now go down to quadrant B, and I'm going to plot my point just there. And I can see if I look at the x-axis, I've got the number 4, so I'm going to put that there, 4, always have them inside brackets. And if I go at the y-axis, I can see when I move along, I'm on -3. So 4, -3. What do you notice about the 2 numbers in quadrant B? You should spot that one is positive and one is negative. And the first one is positive and the second one is negative. Now let's go over to quadrant C. Let's plot a point here. I'm going to plot that point just there. Can you tell me where I've plotted that? Let's go to the x-axis first, and I can see that I'm on -6 there. So let's pop that in, -6, and then on the y-axis, I've hit at -3. So I pop the -3 in. What do you notice about those 2 numbers in quadrant C? They are both negative numbers. And again, this is easy to spot because if I look at my x-axis and my y-axis, I can see that all the numbers are negative along the x-axis and negative along the y-axis. So let's move to the last quadrant, quadrant D. Let's plot a point there. I'm going to go for this one here. And if I look at my x-axis, I can see if I follow that dot all the way down, I'm on -6. So let's pop that down, -6. And then if I go to the y-axis, I can see that I'm on 8 there. What do you notice about the numbers in quadrant D? That you have a negative number and a positive number. And it's easy to spot these because the 2 diagonally opposite quadrants are opposite. You've got positive and positive, and then you've got negative and negative. And then if we go to quadrant B, we can see we've got positive numbers along the x-axis, and then we've got negative numbers. And the opposite will be true for quadrant D. Here you have your negative number first on the x-axis, and then your positive number on the y-axis. And it's really important to be able to understand how this grid works because we will be using this to do more complex questions.
Now we are going to use and apply some of the knowledge we've just learned. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to label each quadrant. So this was quadrant A, this was quadrant B on the bottom right hand side, quadrant C and quadrant D. And we're going to plot these 4 points that we've been given: -4 and 5, -4 and -3, 7, 5 and 7, -3. Okay, so if I look at my first point, I've got -4 and 5. If I look at my x-axis, I can see that my negative numbers are on the left-hand side. So I go over to -4 and I'm going to go up 5. Since it's a positive 5, it's up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to mark that with an X. And I'm just going to label my x-axis, and that's my horizontal line. My y-axis is the vertical line. Okay, now if I go to my next point, it's -4 and -3. What quadrant does that go in? Well, since they're both negative numbers, I can see that I've got my negative numbers on my x-axis on the left-hand side, and my negative numbers on the y-axis go down below 0. -4, -3 is going to be in quadrant C. By the way, as you're doing them, do cross them off so you know that you've used them, and if you walk away and come back to this, you know where you left off. Okay, so that's my second point. I'm going to cross that off. Then I've got 7, 5. They are both positive numbers. Can you think where they're going to go? If I look at my x-axis, I've got all the positive numbers on the right-hand side. The y-axis, all the positive numbers are above 0, so that's going to be 7, 5 in quadrant 8. I'm going to mark that with a cross. And finally, the last one, I've got 7, -3. So that's going to go in quadrant B. So I go over to 7, which is 1 after 6. It's got -3, so I go down 3. 1, 2, 3. If I read across and I read my y-axis, I read the scale on the y-axis, I can see that 3, -3, is between -2 and -4. So those are my 4 points which I've plotted. Now I'm going to join them together. And this is what your shape should look like. Now this can be tricky. When you're plotting your points, be very, very careful that you have got them in the right place. If your shape, the shape that you produce then doesn't look like the one on my answer sheet, go back and check that you have plotted in the correct place. It could be that you have got them in the right place, you just haven't joined them correctly. So that might need a little bit of looking at. It is tricky, especially if you've got a lot of points to plot. Let's look at the second one. So this time I'm not going to label my quadrants. What I will do is I'll put my X in on the horizontal and the Y on the vertical. And up here I'll put X for all of my first numbers. Y refers to the second number, which is the vertical axis. My first one says -1 and -3. I know that's going to be in quadrant C. I want to try and learn these off by heart and know where they are automatically now. That point has already been given to you. Mark it with a cross. Then I'm going to go to 5 -3. So 5, that's a positive 5 on my x-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it says -3, so that means I have to go down 3 from 5. 1, 2, 3. That's where I plot that point. Cross it off, so I know I've done it. And the last one is 2, 3. They're both positive, so what do you know about where they will go? They will go in quadrant A, since they're both positive numbers. I go over to my x-axis, 1, 2. My 3 is a positive 3, so what direction do I go in? I go up 3, 1, 2, 3, and there's my cross. Join them together, and that's what my shape should look like. Be very careful. Often when I'm working in class, I see this point here at 2, 3. Often it's gone over to the left or gone over to the right. So be ever so careful when you're plotting your points. And that's how you do these questions.